Little tales from the couch because we're going to do so much draft stuff today. We got two LA games that I was focused on, Clippers at Milwaukee. So we'll go with that game first. News and notes on that one. No Giannis. He's only missed 3 games this season, but no Chris Middleton. This one's a little bit more alarming. It was an update before the game that basically was no update. He's had this ankle injury. He's missed 11 straight games. He's actually only missed 19 games in the season. But the update was that we don't really know when he's coming back. Giannis, on the other side of things, you do realize he's averaging 31 a game at 62% from the floor. So he's over 30 and over 60 from the floor. No player has ever done that for a full season, and no player has ever done it as late into a season as Giannis is doing it. So if you wanted a night off, no problem. By the way, his true shooting percentage for his career is .610. It's .657 this season. Incredible stuff. All right, so we expected a big Dame night, and we got it. He had 15 points in the first quarter. There was a lot of stuff during the game that I was worried about with Milwaukee. I was worried about some of the defensive stuff. We'll get you those numbers. They're a lot better now if you go over the last, 15 games or so. But I was worried about some of the individual defense because of what the Clippers provide. And when I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, so Pat Bev's on Paul George to start, and he's going to harass the shit out of him. But, eventually the George size thing's going to be too much for him. Although there was a pretty funny moment. Depends on how you feel about Pat Bev. Others might find it annoying. But Pat Bev got knocked down. George was standing near him, and Pat Bev was like, help me up to Paul George. Meanwhile, his Bucks teammate was closer to him, but Bev was just sitting there, essentially, I guess, trolling in a way, although that word is overused, George for not reaching down and helping him get back up. And obviously, Pat knew what he was doing. And then he had Jay Crowder on Kawhi, where I was like, okay, this is a problem, because the times early on when it looked like Kawhi wanted to get past Jay Crowder, he could do it at any point. And that may have spoke to why the minutes were the minutes the way they were to close this game. So a couple quick hitters. I'm worried about Bones Highland's entry passes. Another one, Amir Coffey. Does he play too fast? Great energy, and that's why he's out there in the 42% from 3, but plays really fast. Sometimes it feels too fast. LA's up 55-48 at the half. I got worried about Milwaukee again because during the third quarter stretch, Dame was playing with 4 guys that can't create. So I'm kind of like looking at the rotations going, all right, what are they trying to do here? It's Crowder again. It's Beverly, although Beverly was good. And then Brooke Lopez, who you have to keep around to battle the Clippers on the bigger side of things, and then Beasley, who just had a bad game shooting. So when I was looking at those 4 with Dame, I'm like, where's the shot creation going to come out of this where Dame's going to get stuck on some of the possessions? But it didn't really matter because Dame was still doing enough. He had 29 points through 3 quarters. Then when I was looking at what they were doing defensively with Dame, they actually had Kawhi on him. I think some possessions there to close the third, and then definitely a lot more into the fourth. And looking at some of the Jay Crowder stuff that I didn't like from last night, I think there's a reason he only played 18 minutes. He also, if you go across his stat line and look at like the analytics for him, it's a pretty strong argument. This is the worst season he's ever had, going back to when he even got started with Dallas. So I'm sitting here constantly worried about, LA's up. I'm worried about Milwaukee and some of this rotational stuff. And then it's 81-73 going into the fourth quarter. We mentioned the Dame totals, so he's getting it done. And then he basically controlled the game, even if he wasn't making shots, because the Clippers sold out so much defensively against him. And we'll run through some of that stuff. When you set that high screen for Dame, he gets into a shot off of it so quickly that it's really hard for you to even react, even if most players coming off that screen and wanting to keep 2 with the ball handler, in this case Lillard, you should still be able to get a decent enough contest, but Lillard gets up into it so quickly, he can get the shot off before you're ready. He also is probably the best in the league, maybe he or Harden, at that screen contact. Trae Young's good at it too. I don't always love those calls, and I think the refs also don't love it because they call it on the ground so often. But it's a part of the defensive strategy against him. It's like if I get 2 into him, trailing him on the screen, or 2 into him, or working around the screen, he's just going to get his arms up and then end up getting a foul on me anyway. And I think the best part about Dame, which makes him so dangerous offensively, is that with all that shooting stuff, even with the bad shooting nights, which you can certainly have, and look, pretty much anybody can with that kind of volume, but he still is getting to the rim, and he's just a terrific small finisher. And then he ends up with 14 or 13 free throws last night. So when it's that high screen action, it's extending your defense out that far. And I don't feel like it was like really, really deep where he's crossing half court, because sometimes you'll see that. Portland used to do that all the time, and you're seeing it maybe a little bit more in Milwaukee now. So it wasn't necessarily that. It was that they decided, hey, we're going to live with whatever else is going to happen offensively, but we have to force the ball out of Harden's hands. Harden got it going big time in the first half of the fourth, but it was really only him. The first non-Harden points in the fourth quarter for the Clippers came on a Paul George 3 that made it 96-90, still Clippers leading at 5:33 to go in the game. So I was worried a little bit, like Harden hit a couple threes, a couple and ones. I mean, it was really, really strong there, but it's something I'll bring up at the end because the Clippers just felt like they got stuck. And a lot of that was Milwaukee's defense as well. So it kind of goes both ways on that. So there's a great block by Brook Lopez on Kawhi to the defensive stuff there. Harden, a bad turnover against Pat Bev, Dame layup. So, it's both things. Milwaukee's defense is better now. I'll give you that number, I promise. And it was also the Clippers. I don't know if it was they kept waiting for Harden to carry over what he had done in the first 6 minutes of that fourth quarter. I think he came back in at like 11 because they didn't want to watch any more Bones Highland. So Milwaukee closes this, not the final score, but closes out the game essentially with this 15-0 run from that second half of the fourth quarter on. Again, not saying that it was 15-0 to close the game. L.A. decided on every Dame screen, two are staying with him, selling out. We want him to just have to get the ball out of his hands. Pat Bev had a 3. A.J. Green had 2 threes. They had a double on Dame where he swung it to Brook Lopez, but then on the backside, you have players defensively for the Clippers scrambling a bit. Portis sees the gap, steps up from the opposite block, kind of gets in the paint. Great awareness by Brook because the math is in your favor because Dame is so far away on this double. It's like dragging, it's asking a lot for your team to be able to cover all of it. And this is where Portis went crazy. It was a great play there for him. Then they took Kawhi off of Dame and put Paul George on him. And then I started to wonder, are they thinking, well, look, if we're going to stay with 2 on Dame and they're pulling us this far away and opening up everything else, maybe it's better to just at least have Kawhi still in the defensive play after the pass is made because the way we're doing it now, Kawhi is like just kind of out of it after the pass is made. And that's basically what the Clippers decided. Hey, we'll live with an A.J. Green 3 or 2. And they got both of them. We'll live with Bobby Portis. He goes off. We'll live with Pat Bev hitting a couple shots. It all worked out. And that is the value of even just one special offensive player because when the other team is determined to try to slow him down in the fourth quarter because he'd been cooking them all night, that didn't work either. And it's just kind of one of those nights. Portis was 5 of 7 in the fourth quarter. He ended up with 28 and 16 in 30 minutes. He's been a lot steadier now the last month. Double figures in 14 of his last 15 games after some probably, I would say, inconsistent play there for him. Milwaukee's the 2 seed today. They're 1 game up on Cleveland, and Milwaukee's won 6 straight, 8 of the last 10. And here's the most important thing. This defense that we've been talking about all season long about being a problem. Last 15 games, they are the number 2 defense in the NBA. Let's talk Lakers. Oh, wait. Let's not talk Lakers yet. Clippers are the 4 seed, 2.5 games behind the 3 seed, but still only 3 games behind the 1 seed with it all shuffling with Minnesota and OKC in the last day. Now, the Clippers were 34 and 15 on February 5th. So that was that 25 and 6 run. They're 5 and 6 since. Looking at the numbers here, the defense has been slipping. The rebounding has gotten worse. During the 25 and 6 stretch, they were the number 1 offense and the number 16 defense, but the rebounding was better. So the defense has not been like out of this world at any point. I do wonder if there's this stale point that they hit after that great run. You could also argue during this 5 and 6 stretch, after that incredible 2-month stretch where they looked like the best team in the NBA, they played New Orleans, Minnesota twice, Golden State, OKC, Sacramento, Lakers, and Milwaukee. So, you could just look at the schedule and say, well, that's a pretty ridiculous streak of teams in 11 games. They also, it could just be, hey, we know what our best is, and we're not going to sustain that all the way until April anyway. So that could be it. I don't know if it's alarming enough yet after how great it was. I even looked at some Harden stuff where I was like, okay, did he hold the ball too long? And I know it's some of you going to say, oh, you're just trying to find a way to blame Harden. But some of the isolation, long possession, what I mean by that is like how many seconds the player is actually holding it. Well, I looked at all the touch stuff and seconds the ball is in Harden's hand month by month. there's not really anything in there. I mean, the touches went up because the touches went up as you get a little bit more comfortable in playing, the full scope of a game as one of the main five guys. But I don't think there was anything necessarily that jumped right out at me that I feel like is a long-term trend or trending in the wrong direction. I just felt a little bit late. They just stopped moving. They just stopped moving a little bit. And this Milwaukee defense has been really good now for a month. Okay, now we can talk about OKC at the Lakers. Shout out to the Bulls in the comeback, by the way. Shout out. And shout out to Matt Hunt's confidence. Memphis Grizzlies. Get your Google machine ready when we're watching those games. So Oklahoma City had beat Phoenix on Sunday night. This was one of the worst turnover games I've seen from an NBA team in a long time. Phoenix had 22 turnovers, so only 6 for Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City points off turnovers 31-9. But I'm telling you, it was the unforced ones where a guy sets up. It's not at the opposite elbow, but it's kind of elbow extended inside of the break, position different all the time. Oh, wow, double on Durant. Okay, well, I got to swing it to the other side. Or whoever has the ball, I got to swing it to the other side. There was no Booker in this game. They're just throwing it across the court, and the Thunder just picking them off left and right. And Freddie Brown type stuff. You're like, what are you guys doing right now? And I had to say, it was so bad on Sunday. I'm like, I can't believe this happened. Now, unbelievably, Phoenix down 24 in that game, comes back, gets up 6, and then loses it. Same night, Nurkic had 31 rebounds. The kind of thing where you're like, wait, is that right? Yeah, it's right. Because what have we talked about with the Thunder? 29th in rebounding rate. But it didn't matter because Phoenix just kept giving them the basketball over and over and over again. Another thing that we saw is that Phoenix completely sagged off of Giddey because if you look at the shooting around Giddey, it's one of your only defensive options, and you're trying to figure out another way for a body to cheat towards Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or if Jalen Williams has it going. So that game was its own lesson in there. And when you look at Oklahoma City's three-point shooting, SGA's at 38%. Jalen Williams is at 44%. He was 36% last season. Chet's at 40%. Dort's at 40%. Only in one of his previous seasons, I think 4 seasons, he'd been over 34%. Isaiah Joe's at 42%. Kaysen Wallace is at 41%. Even Wiggins is at 51%. So Giddey's at 33%. So I'm going to look for this even more. And it was something that I noticed in the Lakers game. The other things I was looking for in this Lakers matchup was, would Dort get so into LeBron that LeBron would, just be deferring a little bit more? And then, of course, I wanted to look at AD and Chet and this continued, I think it's a fatal flaw for the Thunder. As much as I love so much about how well they're coached, how smart they are, blowing that lead to Phoenix and then still closing it out, having all these guys that are kind of multiple, interchangeable, I worry about them around the paint. I just worry about some of the stuff at the rim there and the rebounding numbers. Some of these nights you'll look at it and you just go, this is tough to compete. So for all the other things that we're looking at, it didn't really matter because in the second quarter, I had one of those moments where you're watching a game and you're like, the Lakers are on fire right now. And I'm not talking about shooting. Their energy, and this is why coaches are always going to drive themselves slowly insane. Coaches know that if everybody just played with a little bit more effort, everything would be better. But it's not like it would have happened already. Although I'd say there's some Coach K Duke teams that back in the day when that thing was really rolling, where I'd watch their defensive intensity and how smart they were. I was like, man, is anybody going to score against these guys tonight? I'm serious. That's how impressed I was with certain Duke teams defensively. I'm like, these guys just get after it the entire time. An NBA team, 82 of these tilts, you're not going to. So when you do see it, you'll almost have a moment. And I had it last night. There were some defensive possessions where Reeves is on the baseline against SGA, and SGA is trying to put him in the blender, and Reeves stays on his feet and gets a contest. There's another play where Dinwiddie ends up with Dort in an isolation. I wouldn't say Dinwiddie's going to be on any all-NBA defensive teams. And Dinwiddie stays with him, tracked him well, and then still recovered enough to get a contest on the shot. And then Chet got a little lost against Rui, lost track of where AD was, and then he Bill Murray Rushmore'd him with the block from behind. And I'm just sitting there during this 12-0 run going, they are fired up. And then there was a turnover where D'Angelo Russell got it back to LeBron. The place was going wild. So some of these smaller things that I were looking for were completely irrelevant because they didn't really matter because the Lakers played with that much intensity. Yes, I know it's a back-to-back for Oklahoma City. I just talked about the game that happened the previous night. What I don't like doing is dismissing any time a a good team loses to a lesser team, and in this case in the standings it's pretty self-explanatory, that it's only because of the back-to-back. I think it can get, there are certain games I'll look at and be like, that feels like a schedule loss. And you know what? If you're with the Thunder, maybe this was, but it's become way too commonplace to any time your team loses a fucking game, it's like, oh, back-to-back, 5-7, you know? Somebody hit me up with the Warriors 5-7. They were down 44 at the half to Boston, okay? 44. All right. I know it was a long scheduled thing, but we can't just apply that to every single time, although fan bases are going to do that. So I can't really win that fight. So they also did a great job, I think, with Anthony Davis, getting him some momentum towards the hoop to make it even tougher for Chet. It's one thing to hold up in post when the guy's not moving. It's another thing dealing with that momentum. And they did some real cool two-man game, not super complicated, just trying to get AD with some momentum towards the hoop. I even saw AD playing with, I always talk about that Memphis game, 2018 or 2019. The intensity he played with in that night against the Memphis Grizzlies was like the all-time stuff. He shot 1 million free throws. You don't have to go back and watch it. It was just like, whoa, like, how come we don't see this all? There were hints at that, levels of that last night. And also because you're like, wait, if Chet's here, like Chet's great. He's going to be really, really good. That's a big ask. And there's no Jalen Williams, too, to back him up. He was out, I think, knee injury. And Bismack Biyombo got a 7-minute stint in there. So shout out to him. So, look, let's take a look. I got to talk about D'Angelo Russell because he went for 26. And the third three that he hit in the fourth quarter, he hit 3 of them. I didn't even know what he was doing. No idea. He's been on a heater now the last few months, shooting from 3, 46%, 42%, 39% in just the 2 games here in March. Taurean Prince, you were like, why is this guy shooting? Well, 4-6 last night from 3. So that was good. It was just, look, man, it was all looking Lakers. Now, here's the thing with the Lakers. They've got 5 straight now against Sacramento, Milwaukee, Minnesota, at Sacramento, and Golden State. So they're going to be home for 4 of the 5. They have 1 to 2 day breaks. So even though you're looking at it and being like, hey, they're not going to play a sub-500 team until they play Atlanta in a couple weeks, but there are breaks either 1 or 2 days in between all of these games, and 4 of them are at home. So for a Lakers team that's 17-21 against teams 500 or better, which is kind of where all those 8, 9, 10 teams all are. Dallas is sub 500. Their record is worse against 500 teams. Golden State's record against 500 better teams is disastrous. And every single fan base can play the game of like, oh, but our guys were out and now we're good or whatever. Make all the excuses you want. The Lakers have not been good against the better teams, but they have been recently. Competitive with Denver, beating OKC, coming back against the Clippers. And then, look, you always got to kind of include Sacramento in all of this. Let's see how it looks against a tougher slate here for the next 5. But it's actually not a huge ask considering how often they're home. And the only other road game in that is in the state of California. And there are all of those breaks.